Have you ever found yourself in that classic workplace dilemma? Maybe you had a boss who, despite their best intentions, would humiliate you, or perhaps even ridicule you behind your back, all in the name of tough love,
Oh,
maybe.
yeah. Or the opposite, right?
Exactly, the complete flip side. You had a boss you genuinely liked, maybe liked so much, you simply couldn't bring yourself to tell them their work was, well, frankly, terrible.
It's such a common tightrope walk for all of us, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it really is. And if you've been in a leadership role, you might recognize that familiar paralysis, that fear of being seen as a jerk, or, the quiet dread of inadvertently letting things slide until resentment quietly festers and performance inevitably dips.
Hmm.
We all navigate these incredibly complex human dynamics at work, and sometimes the traditional advice, be nice or don't say anything if you don't have anything nice to say, actually leads us down a path of immense frustration and, ironically, truly poor performance.
It's a foundational challenge, really, for any leader, no matter the industry or team size. How do you deliver genuinely tough feedback without, destroying a relationship you value?
Right.
And conversely, how do you build a strong, trusting relationship without becoming so nice that you kind of shy away from the necessary criticism that fuels growth?
Exactly.
It's a delicate balance, and getting it wrong can cost you dearly in terms of team morale, results, even your own sanity, maybe.
It absolutely is. And today, that's precisely the knot we're going to try and untangle. We're taking a deep dive into a powerful practical framework from Kim Scott's groundbreaking book, Radical Candor, your guide to being a kick-ass boss without losing your humanity. Our mission today is to really unpack the core ideas of radical candor, that potent combination of genuinely caring personally and challenging directly, and show you not just what it is, but how to truly implement these principles in your leadership, maybe starting tomorrow.
Yeah, we're going to explore some surprising insights, share powerful, often really candid anecdotes straight from Scott's own experiences at these transformative companies like Google and Apple.
Right.
We'll distill these learnings into actionable steps you can take. This isn't just theory. It's a practical roadmap born from real-world successes and, importantly, real-world failures, too.
Yeah, those failures are sometimes the best lessons.
Absolutely. So get ready for those aha moments,
Yep.
the kind that will fundamentally change how you think about feedback, how you approach building relationships, and how you genuinely drive results, whether you're managing a small team or an entire division.
It's about getting the essence of this transformative approach without getting bogged down in endless detail, but with enough depth that you walk away truly understanding the why behind the what.
That's the goal.
So let's unpack this and get right to the core. At the heart of radical candor are two fundamental, often sort of counterintuitive dimensions that really define how you interact as a leader. They influence everything you do. The first is what Scott calls care personally. Now, this isn't about being fluffy or overly touchy-feely or even just about being professional in that old school sense. It's about bringing your whole self to work, genuinely giving a damn, and truly caring about your team members as, complex, messy human beings, not just as cogs in a machine.
What's truly transformative about care personally is how much it pushes back against that old adage, it's just business.
Right, that classic line.
Scott argues quite powerfully that leadership is deeply personal. This dimension is the absolute bedrock of trust. Think about it. If your team doesn't believe you genuinely care about them as people,
Yeah.
any direct challenge you give, no matter how well-intentioned, can easily feel like a personal attack. It undermines everything you're trying to achieve. It requires a level of human connection that, many traditional management styles actively discourage.
Yeah.
They saw it as unprofessional or maybe a distraction. But it's essential for authentic feedback to actually land.
And Scott actually learned this powerful lesson very early in her career in a really unexpected place, didn't she?
She did.
She recounts this amazing story about trying to hire Russian diamond cutters in Moscow back in the early 90s, right after the fall of the Soviet Union.
Oh, yeah.
She was armed with US dollars, convinced that was the ultimate motivator in that new emerging market, but, it wasn't enough. The people she was trying to hire weren't just transactional, they were looking for something more. It was her surprising background in Russian literature that ultimately helped her connect with them on a deeply human level.
Russian literature, that's unexpected.
Right. Understanding their culture, their history, their aspirations beyond just the money. This allowed her to build genuine rapport, which led to immense success in getting them to join her team and produce exceptional work.
So it wasn't just about the cash.
Not at all. What that story truly reveals isn't just about cultural nuance, it's the radical insight that genuine human connection, seeing the whole person, not just transactional incentives, is the ultimate currency of leadership. It's what makes the impossible possible sometimes.
That's a fantastic example of building genuine rapport. Scott also references Fred Kaufman's mantra at Google, bring your whole self to work.
Oh yeah, I've heard that one.
It's a concept famously embraced by Sheryl Sandberg and also a cornerstone for leaders like Stuart Butterfield, the CEO of Slack. It means modeling vulnerability, admitting when you're having a bad day or when you've made a mistake, for example.
Which is hard for leaders sometimes.
Totally. But doing that creates a safe space for others to do the same. This personal openness, this willingness to be seen as human is absolutely crucial for building deep trust.
And it's the antidote, isn't it, to a really destructive mindset that can creep into leadership roles, managerial arrogance.
Oh, definitely.
Scott points out that when bosses start to subtly, or maybe not so subtly, feel inherently better or smarter than their team, it's impossible to be truly effective. She specifically dislikes terms like superior or employee.
Interesting. Why is that?
Because she feels they reinforce a sense of hierarchy that can block genuine connection and create an us versus them dynamic. Being a boss, she says, is simply a job, a role within a team, not a value judgment about your worth or intelligence compared to others. It's a job you're hired to do, just like everyone else has a job to do.
Yeah, that's a really grounded perspective. So caring personally isn't about, like, rote memorization of birthdays or forcing awkward chit-chat at mandatory social events.
No, definitely not.
It's about creating an environment where you can find time for real, meaningful conversations.
Right.
It's about actively listening to understand what truly motivates each person, what makes them want to get out of bed in the morning and do their best work, or maybe what has the opposite effect, what's holding them back.
Right.
It's about authentic human connection, which is, as we said, the bedrock for building trust. And once you have that trust,
Then you can move on.
then you can truly move into the second critical dimension of radical candor.
Absolutely. Once you have that foundation of trust, you can truly move into the second, equally vital dimension of radical candor. Challenge directly.
Okay, the other axis.
Exactly. This means giving clear, candid feedback, both praise and criticism, without fear of hurting feelings or, beating around the bush. It's about communicating with such precision and clarity that there's absolutely no room for misinterpretation, but crucially, always delivering that message with humility.
This is often where a lot of us hit a pretty significant wall, I think, because it requires actively undoing a lifetime of conditioning.
Totally.
Think about it. From childhood, many of us are taught, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
But in a professional context, especially in a dynamic, high-performing team, that kind of avoidance is disastrous.
Mm-hmm.
Without challenging directly, problems fester, mistakes get repeated, and people simply can't grow or improve. Scott really drives this home with that powerful quote from John Stuart Mill. His errors are corrigible by discussion and experience.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a profound reminder that productive discussion, even when it feels uncomfortable, is absolutely essential for rectifying mistakes and fostering learning.
And I love the analogy Scott uses that perfectly captures that feeling of finally making a breakthrough in communication when direct challenge is embraced. She recalls the classic "help me help you" scene from Jerry Maguire.
Oh yeah, classic.
You might feel like you're fighting in that moment, right? But in reality, you're finally talking. You're finally engaging in the kind of direct, honest exchange that was previously avoided, and that's where genuine progress actually happens.
It also helps clarify the very terms radical and candor themselves. Radical here isn't about being extreme or aggressive. It means going to the root of the issue. It's about pushing past that social conditioning that tells us to sugarcoat or obfuscate or completely avoid difficult truths. Candor, on the other hand, implies clear, humble, direct communication.
Humble is key there.
Absolutely. It's not about believing, the truth and delivering it from on high like some infallible oracle. It's more about humbly offering your perspective and observation to help someone improve. It's about helpfulness, not superiority.
And it's crucial to understand what radical candor is not, isn't it?
Yes, very important.
It's not a license to be gratuitously harsh, to be a jerk, or to nitpick every tiny detail. Scott is very clear that it's about focusing only on things that really matter, things that impact performance, the team, or the individual's growth.
Right.
She even suggests a practical rule of thumb. Try to leave 3 unimportant things unsaid each day. focus your energy.
That's practical. It's
Yeah.
also important to remember that radical candor is not hierarchical. It applies to communication up, down, and sideways. You should be able to offer radical candor to your boss, your peers, and of course your direct reports.
So it's a 360-degree thing.
Exactly. And it's definitely not about forced schmoozing or mandatory, awkward team-building exercises like laser tag or paintballing.
Ugh, yeah.
True connection comes from meaningful, authentic interactions, not from contrived social events. Scott shares stories about well-intentioned team social events that completely backfired because they felt obligatory, intrusive, or simply irrelevant to the genuine human connection she advocates for.
What's also fascinating and quite important, I think, for anyone leading diverse teams is that while radical candor is universally human, that need for both care and directness exists everywhere. Its expression is actually culturally relative.
Ah, that's a key point.
It's measured at the listener's ear, not the speaker's mouth. You have to adapt. Scott illustrates this with a really stark contrast between Israeli and Japanese cultures.
Okay, how so?
In an Israeli startup, for example, she observed incredibly brutal directness. She saw the COO yelling at an engineer about an inefficient design, using language that in other cultures would be considered, deeply offensive.
Oh.
But in that specific cultural context, it was actually seen as a sign of respect, a push to get to the right answer, almost like questioning scripture to find deeper truth.
That's intense. And Japan.
Yes, and in Tokyo, she experienced the absolute opposite extreme. Her Google team was deeply frustrated with product decisions coming from U.S. headquarters, but they were simply too polite, too culturally conditioned to challenge directly.
So how did she handle that?
Well, forcing them to adopt an Israeli-style directness would not only have been offensive, but completely ineffective. Instead, Scott encouraged them to be politely persistent.
Politely persistent. I like that.
Their politeness demonstrated their caring personally, while their quiet, relentless persistence was how they were comfortable challenging directly. This approach, tailored to their cultural norms, ultimately led to significant product improvements and a more engaged team.
It truly underlines that you must adapt how you deliver radical candor to the specific cultural context, or it simply won't land effectively, no matter your intention.
That's a huge takeaway for anyone in leadership today, I think. It's not a one-size-fits-all script that you can just copy-paste. It's about adapting the delivery while fiercely maintaining those core principles of genuine care and direct challenge. Okay, so if radical candor is the sweet spot, the ideal state of leadership and communication, it stands in stark contrast to what Scott calls the bad quadrants, places you absolutely want to avoid at all costs.
Right, the pitfalls.
The first of these is ruinous empathy. This is where you care personally, perhaps even deeply, but you completely fail to challenge directly.
This is often the default for many well-meaning managers, isn't it? And it's arguably the most common trap leaders fall into.
Seems like it.
The core idea here is being nice to avoid upsetting people or to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. But in doing so, you ultimately hurt them by withholding the critical, candid feedback they desperately need to improve, to grow, and to avoid bigger problems down the line.
So the niceness is actually harmful.
Exactly. This quadrant creates a false sense of security for the individual, where they might believe everything is fine, even as they underperform. And over time, it deeply erodes trust within the broader team. Others inevitably see the underperformance and wonder why it's being tolerated, leading to resentment and a culture of mediocrity.
Yeah, that makes sense.
People simply can't grow, and other team members often resent having to constantly cover for poor performance. It's just ruinous.
This brings us back to Scott's seminal and most painful story about Bob from the introduction of her book. You remember Bob?
Oh, the Bob story, yes.
Bob was a genuinely likable, kind, funny colleague with a stellar resume from previous roles at top companies. But his work on Kim's team was, by all accounts, terrible.
Right.
Scott openly admitted her mistake. She liked Bob, didn't want to upset him, and convinced herself he'd eventually improve, or that she could simply fix his work herself in the background. So instead of confronting the issue,
So you avoided it.
she offered false praise and completely failed to confront his incoherent work, letting things slide day after day for months.
And the consequences were just devastating for everyone involved, weren't they?
Totally.
Bob, despite the false praise, probably knew deep down his work wasn't good. So the insincere compliments just mess with his mind, allowing him to deceive himself into thinking he was doing okay. This completely removed any incentive he might have had to improve.
He just kept going.
He continued along the same counterproductive course. Scott admits she let this go on for 10 months, feeling resentment build within herself and the team. This lack of direct criticism also profoundly impacted the entire team. Others wondered why poor work was accepted. They tried to cover for Bob, leading to sloppy work, missed deadlines, and a palpable decline in team morale.
And then what happened?
Ultimately, Bob was fired, a decision Scott considers the low point of her career, recognizing that her niceness had been truly devastating, not just for Bob, but for the whole team and its results.
It's such a powerful, gut-wrenching illustration that nice isn't always kind. Think about the fly-down scenario Scott used.
Oh yeah, the zipper thing?
You know a colleague's fly is down, but you say nothing out of fear of embarrassing them in the moment. The result: 10 more people see it throughout the day. The person is more embarrassed when they finally realize, perhaps at the end of the day.
And they wonder why you didn't say anything.
Exactly. That silence, that ruinous empathy, plants deep seeds of mistrust and awkwardness.
The impact on the boss in this quadrant is equally negative too. It leads to immense frustration, quiet resentment, and an active avoidance of the employee in question. Nobody wins in the long run.
Okay, so that's ruinous empathy. Then there's the exact opposite problem: obnoxious aggression.
Right. The other extreme.
This is where you challenge directly, often very directly, but you completely fail to care personally.
This quadrant is characterized by delivering criticism or even praise in a way that belittles, humiliates, or targets vulnerabilities rather than focusing on the work or the behavior itself.
So it gets personal.
Exactly. While it might, in some rare cases, get short-term results because people are maybe afraid, it leaves a trail of dead bodies in its wake. It absolutely destroys trust, culture, and long-term psychological safety.
It's like using criticism as a weapon.
Precisely. Not as a tool for improvement or growth. Scott even says that if you can't bring yourself to be radically candid, obnoxious aggression is the second best thing you can do because at least people know where they stand.
Really, second best. That sounds harsh.
It is, but she's incredibly clear. She refuses to work with people who consistently operate in this quadrant and can't show basic human decency. The cost is always too high, but the clarity is better than manipulative insincerity, which we'll get to.
Okay. She gives a classic example of her own early mistake at Google, doesn't she?
Yes, the Larry Page email.
Fresh out of business school, full of herself, she sent an arrogant, accusatory email to Larry Page, among others, publicly attacking his policy regarding Google AdWords and implying he was prioritizing revenue over Google's mission.
Ouch, to Larry Page.
Yeah. She later called it front stabbing, an improvement over backstabbing maybe, but still really, really bad. She admitted she personalized the criticism, attacking his character instead of the policy, and she hadn't even bothered to understand his rationale or the complexity of the situation before publicly lambasting him. A clear case of obnoxious aggression.
What's even more surprising is how praise itself can be weaponized in this quadrant.
How so?
Scott recounts a shocking example from a Silicon Valley VP who publicly shared sensitive compensation details and deeply belittling comments, calling one person's work dirty work and another's bonus for covering John, all under the guise of praise in a company-wide email.
That's terrible.
It vividly illustrates how even positive feedback, delivered with obnoxious aggression and a complete lack of personal care, can make recipients feel worse, not better, and completely destroy dignity and trust.
And then there's the famous Steve Jobs quote, "Your work is shit." How does that fit in?
Right. Scott acknowledges this is an extreme example, deep in the obnoxious aggression quadrant, but she notes that Jobs often followed such brutal statements with a clear articulation of why the work wasn't good enough and how to get back on track.
So there was substance behind the harshness.
His intent, Scott argues, was not to personalize "you're not good enough," but to convey "your work isn't good enough for our shared mission." It was a harsh, often painful form of investment, pushing relentlessly for excellence, but it was definitely on the perilous border of obnoxious aggression.
Risky territory.
Very. And it often worked, perhaps, because of the unique relationships he built with his core team. People knew he was relentlessly focused on getting to the right answer, not on being liked. Scott calls the absolute worst kind of obnoxious aggression cruel empathy, where insights into a person's vulnerabilities are deliberately used to hurt or manipulate.
That sounds awful.
It is. As the late Colin Powell famously said, leadership is sometimes about being willing to piss people off. Now, he wasn't advocating for rudeness or aggression,
You're right,
but highlighting that avoiding difficult decisions or necessary truths out of a simple desire to be liked is a dangerous path that leads to mediocrity. A boss who's overly worried about being liked can easily slide into ruinous empathy, whereas one who doesn't care about being liked at all can become obnoxiously aggressive. Finding that balance is key.
Okay, so ruinous empathy, obnoxious aggression. Finally, we arrive at the absolute worst quadrant, manipulative insincerity. This is when you neither care personally nor challenge directly. It's the ultimate no-go zone.
This is essentially being dishonest, political, or completely disengaged in your interactions. Often done to save face, avoid conflict at all costs, or simply because you don't care enough to engage.
It sounds toxic.
It is. It's a toxic combination of deceit, passive aggression, and complete lack of directness. It fundamentally destroys trust, creates a culture of distrust and suspicion, and makes any genuine progress or connection impossible. It's the quadrant that truly kills morale and productivity.
Scott's own experience with that false apology to Larry Page perfectly illustrates how easy it is to slide into this quadrant and how utterly ineffective it is, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. After her obnoxiously aggressive email, she went to Larry and offered an insincere intellectual reversal, telling him, "I'm sorry about that email, Larry. I know you are right."
But she didn't mean it.
Not at all. Larry, with his famously finely tuned BS meter, immediately picked up on her complete insincerity. This shows how quickly one can descend into manipulative insincerity when trying to avoid consequences or difficult truths, and how transparently ineffective it is. It would have been better to say nothing, or ideally, to genuinely address the tone of her email and her lack of prior understanding.
So these quadrants are like traps.
They really are, like a gravitational pull. Once you're in one, especially ruinous empathy or manipulative insincerity, it's hard to break free without conscious effort. The entire goal of Radical Candor is to consciously and consistently navigate towards that ideal center by both caring personally and challenging directly, understanding that these two dimensions are not in opposition, but are profoundly interdependent.
Okay, so we've explored the core concepts, the profound importance of caring personally and challenging directly, and we've seen the bad quadrants you absolutely want to avoid. Here's where it gets really interesting and actionable for you, the listener. How do you actually do this?
Right, the implementation part.
What are the concrete, actionable strategies for managers to truly implement Radical Candor day to day? Kim Scott provides several, and they start with a crucial, surprisingly counterintuitive step.
That's right. The first and arguably most important strategy is to start by getting guidance, especially criticism, from your team.
Getting it, not giving it.
Exactly. It sounds simple, but the best and fastest way to build trust and prove that you genuinely want to foster radical candor is to show that you can take it first.
Model the behavior.
Precisely. Your role as a boss inherently creates preconceptions and power dynamics that make giving feedback to you really difficult. By actively soliciting criticism, by demonstrating your own openness, you disarm defenses and model the very behavior you want to see from everyone else on your team. You're setting the psychological safety net.
The classic, often cited example here is Sheryl Sandberg's truly masterclass interaction with Scott herself, right?
Yes, the story, it's perfect.
After a successful presentation Scott gave at Google, Sheryl pulled Kim aside. She started gently, pointing out Kim's habit of saying, frequently, and immediately offered to pay for a speech coach.
Which is a tangible offer of help.
Right. When Scott, full of excuses, kind of brushed it off, Sheryl didn't back down. She became really, really direct, telling her word for word, saying, so much makes you sound stupid.
Wow, direct.
But critically, she immediately repeated the offer of tangible support, reminding Kim that she was there to help her succeed. This 2-minute interaction wasn't just effective in solving Scott's problem. It had a profound ripple effect, inspiring Scott to give better, more direct, and yet more caring guidance to her own team.
And it made Scott feel genuinely invested in, didn't it? Not like an idiot with defects. The core message was, I care about you enough to tell you this uncomfortable truth because I want you to be your best. That's radical candor in action.
That's the power of it. It's not mean, it's clear. Scott actually learned this powerful mantra, it's not mean, it's clear, from observing a stranger correcting his dog.
A dog.
Yeah. The owner was firm, immediate, and clear in his correction, and the dog immediately understood and adjusted. It helped Kim overcome her own instinct towards niceness that led to her devastating mistake with Bob.
Connecting back to Bob.
It taught her that you don't always need extensive trust building before offering candid guidance. In fact, offering it clearly and with care can often be the very act that builds trust. It's an investment.
That's a really important point and a really practical tip for getting this feedback from your team. Scott recommends having a go-to question, something you can ask consistently and easily. She suggests Fred Kaufman's brilliant question. Is there anything I could do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me?
That's a good one. Simple, direct.
But you need to be prepared to embrace the discomfort when people initially respond with, oh, everything's fine, or no, everything's great.
Yeah, the polite brush off.
Scott suggests a simple but effective technique.
Mm-hmm.
Silently count to 6 in your head after they respond, then ask again, just making it harder for them to stay silent. Sheryl Sandberg was known for this kind of persistence, famously using it with a seasoned banker who initially wouldn't give her feedback, eventually breaking through his politeness.
Just holding that space.
Exactly. It's all about consistently demonstrating you're truly open, that you mean it. Scott shares the fascinating story of Toyota's red box in Japan.
The red!
Yeah, a physical manifestation of incentivizing criticism. New employees reportedly had to stand in it and not leave until they had criticized 3 things about the company or their process.
Wow, that's intense.
Scott applied this principle by consistently rewarding even small acts of candor from her team in Tokyo, like a seemingly minor complaint about the quality of the office tea. By addressing that small complaint seriously and making a change, she built immense trust, paving the way for more substantive issues to be raised later.
So rewarding the small stuff matters.
Hugely. It shows you're listening consistently, which cultivates a robust culture of openness.
And to make sure you're truly getting the right kind of feedback and that you're giving the right kind of feedback, Scott suggests a simple practice: gauging your own guidance.
How do you do that?
You can use simple tallies of praise versus criticism you deliver, or even use a tool like the radicallycandid.com app to get a baseline and track your improvements over time. This helps you identify if you're defaulting to ruinous empathy by being too nice and not challenging enough, or obnoxious aggression by being too direct without enough care. It provides an objective look at your own behavior.
That makes sense. Data, even simple data, helps. Michael Deering, an executive at eBay, created a similar, simple orange box system for anonymous feedback.
An orange box this time?
Right. He took every submission so seriously that he would always read and address every question respectfully at all hands meetings. Over time, the box eventually emptied, not because there was no more feedback, but because people felt comfortable enough to give direct feedback in person.
That's the goal, isn't it? To not need the box.
Exactly. It's a testament to the profound trust he built through consistent action and accountability. Google even had incredibly effective initiatives like Management Fix-It Weeks or Bureaucracy Busters, modeled after their Engineering Bug Fix Weeks.
Fix-It Weeks for management.
Yeah, where managers would dedicate focused time to resolving employee-logged management issues and frustrations. This was a direct, visible way to show managers were listening, taking feedback seriously, and actively working to improve the work environment.
So, okay, once you're adept at receiving guidance, at opening yourself up to criticism, the next crucial step is giving impromptu guidance using the powerful Situation Behavior Impact Model, SBI.
Right, SBI. This means providing feedback quickly, informally, and critically, focusing on observable actions and their effects, not on personal traits or character judgments.
So, break down SBI for us.
This model Situation Behavior Impact makes feedback incredibly clear, specific, and actionable, making it far more likely to be received constructively. For example, instead of, say, yelling, "You jerk, you took my parking spot," when someone snags a space you were waiting for.
Which many might do.
Right. You'd use the SBI framework. I've been waiting for that spot here for 5 minutes. That's the situation. And you just zipped in front of me and took it. That's the specific behavior. Now I'm going to be late for my meeting. That's the impact.
Ah, I see. It's factual.
Exactly. This approach shifts the focus from an accusation of character to a clear, factual description of what happened and its concrete consequences, giving the person a chance to respond constructively rather than defensively.
And the same goes for praise, right? Making it truly meaningful and memorable.
Absolutely. Instead of a vague, generic, "you're a genius," which, while nice, isn't very helpful.
Not really actionable.
Use SBI. In your presentation this morning, Situation, the way you talked about our decision to diversify and address the key concerns of the finance team, Behavior, was incredibly persuasive because you showed everyone you'd clearly heard and understood the other points of view, Impact.
That's much better. Specific.
It makes the praise specific, actionable, and truly helpful, reinforcing what you want to see more of.
Scott also mentions the left-hand column exercise from Harvard Business School. What's that?
It's where you write down what you thought, but didn't say in a frustrating conversation. alongside what you actually said. This technique helps you identify and question your own snap judgments or assumptions before giving feedback.
So it promotes self-awareness.
Exactly. Promotes humility and prevents personalization. And a simple preamble, something like, I'm going to describe a problem I see. I may be wrong, and if I am, I hope you'll tell me. If I'm not, I hope my bringing it up will help you fix it, can significantly lower the other person's defenses and open them up to hear your message.
That's a great framing. Show, don't tell. That's a key principle too, right? For giving truly helpful feedback.
Yes. Provide explicit, tangible details of what was good or bad, what you observed, to make the guidance truly useful and actionable. And always remember, guidance is a gift, not a weapon.
Right.
Sheryl Sandberg, recommending a speech coach rather than coaching Scott herself, demonstrates profoundly efficient and effective support. You don't have to solve every problem for someone, but providing the candid guidance itself is often the greatest gift you can give.
The most crucial point about impromptu guidance seems to be giving it immediately.
Yes, absolutely critical. Scott stresses it should happen in 2-3 minutes between meetings, in a hallway over a quick coffee, not in a scheduled hour-long formal session weeks later.
Why the immediacy?
Delaying feedback makes it harder to remember specifics, less relevant, and significantly less effective. Think of it like brushing your teeth. Consistent, small actions prevent bigger, more painful problems down the line. It takes energy and consciousness in the moment, but it saves immense time, frustration, and headache later.
And whenever possible, deliver feedback in person or via video.
Preferably. Being present for the emotional reaction helps you gauge how your message is landing, allows you to adjust your message on the fly, and truly show compassion. Maurice Templesman, Scott's boss when she lived in Russia, called her daily, even if just for 3 minutes, purely to pick up on emotional cues from afar.
Even back then, daily calls.
Highlights the enduring importance of frequent direct communication for building empathy and trust, even when remote.
The general rule of thumb is praise in public, criticize in private, right? How does that fit here?
Yes, that applies here to amplify praise and reduce defensiveness. However, Scott adds a critical caveat. Adapt to individual preferences.
Ah, the platinum rule again?
Exactly. True caring means recognizing that some people, for example, absolutely hate public recognition, and forcing it on them would be an act of ruinous empathy. So adapt the delivery in a way that truly benefits the individual. And above all, do not personalize the criticism.
Don't make it about their character.
Right. Understand the fundamental attribution error. The common human tendency to attribute someone's behavior to their personality, you're lazy, rather than to situational factors. You've been working nights and weekends and seem exhausted, how can I help? Focus on that's wrong, or that didn't meet the expectation, not you're wrong.
Okay, moving beyond just giving and receiving guidance, the third strategy is building radically candid relationships beyond just formal feedback. This is really about putting the care personally axis into consistent daily action, isn't it?
Yes. It's about cultivating deep, trusting connections with your direct reports that go beyond just work tasks.
How do you do that practically?
Well, a key part of this is staying centered yourself. Leadership is incredibly demanding, and stressful times can make it hard to genuinely care personally about others. Dick Costolo, the former Twitter CEO, showed a remarkable mental toughness during Twitter's incredibly turbulent ups and downs.
I bet that was tough.
By proactively blocking think time daily on his calendar, making self-care a non-negotiable priority. You can't truly hide your feelings and moods from your team, but you can own them.
Own your mood. How?
If you're having a bad day, say so. This prevents your team from blaming themselves for your mood and allows them to understand you as a human being.
That makes sense. Scott also touches on socializing with caution, right? Team events.
Yes. While team events can be fun and foster camaraderie, they can easily feel mandatory or lead to problems with excessive alcohol, or simply feel like a waste of time after a long day.
Yeah, forced fun isn't always fun.
She shares anecdotes like Marissa Mayer's seasickness on a mandatory whale watching trip, or the story of the team having to go karting right before a meeting about work-life balance. These illustrate how even well-intentioned efforts can backfire.
So what's the alternative?
Sometimes, Scott notes, the greatest gift you can give your team is simply to let them go home and be with their families or pursue their own interests. True connection doesn't require forced fun.
And then there's the delicate, often misunderstood topic of physical space and even hugs. That seems tricky.
It is. Scott talks about the legendary Silicon Valley coach Bill Campbell, who is known for his bear hugs, as an example of a deeply, radically candid embrace.
Bear hugs. Really?
Yeah, he'd hug people, sometimes intensely, and then immediately follow it with tough, direct feedback. For people like Stacey Brown Philpott, this physical warmth and genuine care opened them up to criticism in a way that mere words couldn't.
So the hug enabled the candor.
For some people, yes. This is where the platinum rule comes in. Do unto others as they would have done unto them, not just as you would have done unto you. It's about respecting individual comfort levels, adapting to their preferences for physical interaction, and always ensuring consent.
Consent is key.
Absolutely. Scott even mentions Gretchen Rubin's research on 6-second hugs for boosting oxytocin, highlighting the physiological benefits of genuine human connection, but always within the bounds of respect and comfort.
Finally, learning to recognize and own your own emotions is crucial for any leader. You mentioned that earlier.
Yes. Russ Laraway, another influential mentor, once candidly told Scott, "I know what kind of day I'm going to have by the kind of mood you're in when you walk in the door."
Wow, that's direct feedback.
Right. It speaks to the powerful, often unspoken influence a leader's emotions have on a team. You can't truly hide your feelings, but you can own them so your team doesn't misinterpret your mood or blame themselves.
Any practical tips for that?
Yeah, acknowledging others' emotions explicitly. I see you're upset about this. Asking questions without trying to fix or tell them how to feel. Don't be sad.
Yeah.
Having tissues or water bottles handy if someone gets emotional. And even trying walking conversations instead of confrontational sitting. It's about showing compassion and understanding, not guilt, because people care deeply about their work and will naturally get upset when things go wrong or feel personal.
So, with relationships built on care and guidance being given and received consistently, let's now turn our attention to broader team management techniques that help avoid boredom and burnout. This segment really dives into how you manage the diverse growth trajectories of your team members, right? Acknowledging that not everyone wants the same thing out of their career.
Exactly. This is where Scott introduces the critical, often overlooked distinction between rock stars and superstars.
Rock stars and superstars, tell me more.
The core idea is that not everyone on your team wants to climb the ladder endlessly, pursuing constant promotions and new titles. Some truly want to master their current role, achieve stability, and become world-class at what they do.
So deep experts.
Right. This is a crucial distinction that allows managers to retain high performers and build stable, effective teams, rather than constantly churning people in and out. Scott learned this insight from an Apple leader, realizing her own earlier mistake of only focusing on those most likely to be promoted.
Yes, Scott describes rock stars as being as solid as the Rock of Gibraltar, deeply committed to their craft, world-class at what they do, incredibly valuable, but content and fulfilled staying in their current role. They provide essential stability, deep institutional knowledge, and consistent performance.
And the superstars.
Superstars, on the other hand, are on a steep growth trajectory, constantly needing new challenges, new projects, and new opportunities to expand their skills and responsibilities. A healthy, high-performing team needs a careful balance of both types.
That makes a lot of sense.
Scott admits that for 20 years, she almost exclusively looked for the brightest, brashest, most ambitious people, which she later realized was actually detrimental to team stability and morale, as people constantly moved on, leaving knowledge gaps and instability.
It takes self-awareness for a leader to see that.
Totally. Dick Costolo, Twitter's CEO, truly embodied this philosophy. He recognized Scott's own need for a gradual growth trajectory role as a coach when she needed time to focus on writing her book and her family, rather than pushing her into a role she wasn't ready for at that time.
So this distinction requires managers to critically rethink their own assumptions about ambition and to set aside their own career aspirations when coaching others.
Precisely. And rewarding rock stars is absolutely crucial to retain them. But it's about recognition without forcing a promotion they don't want.
How do you do that?
This could mean significant bonuses, substantial raises, opportunities for public speaking, or even teaching roles where they act. Formal performance ratings should be fair for rock stars and not reserved only for those on promotion tracks. Their consistent, high-quality output deserves the same top ratings as a superstar's steep growth.
And you absolutely don't want to inadvertently squash your superstars either.
No way. Google's system, for example, is brilliant in this regard. It allows individuals to self-nominate for promotion, with objective committees making the final decision, which helps prevent managers from blocking ambitious individuals for their own self-interest.
Takes the manager bias out of it.
Exactly. Google even has an individual contributor career path that is actually often more prestigious than the manager path, allowing technical experts to advance dramatically in their careers without being forced into management roles they don't want or aren't suited for. This means their best engineers can remain engineers rather than becoming reluctant, poor managers.
That's smart design. Next, Scott tackles a surprisingly pervasive, often misleading concept in the workplace: the problem with passion.
Ah, yes. The passion mandate.
The core idea here is that it's not the boss's job to provide passion or purpose for everyone on the team. Instead, a leader's role is to help individual people find meaning and fulfillment in their own work, whatever that might be.
So it's personal again.
Very. Over-insistence on finding passion in every task can create unnecessary pressure and unrealistic expectations. The fundamental reality is that PDM is simply a part of life, and by extension, a part of work.
Scott tells a wonderful story about a philosophy student at Google who candidly called out the company's insistence on passion in every job. Remember that one?
Vaguely, refresh my memory.
He stated very simply, the job is a little boring sometimes. Plutarch laid bricks. Spinoza ground lenses. Tedium is part of life.
I love that. So direct.
Right. This highlights the profound truth that meaning is deeply personal and can be found even in mundane tasks if they contribute to a larger goal or serve a personal purpose. Similarly, the classic Christopher Wren story of the bricklayers, where one saw himself laying bricks, another building a wall, and a third building a cathedral, illustrates these different levels of motivation and meaning.
But the point is that true motivation is highly personal. Not a one-size-fits-all slogan the boss can simply impose or demand. It's about helping individuals connect to their own why.
Exactly.
This leads us directly to perhaps one of the most critical frameworks Scott offers for team leaders. Driving results collaboratively using what she calls the GSD wheel, or Get Stuff Done wheel.
The GSD wheel, okay.
This isn't just a checklist, it's a systematic, iterative process for collective achievement that deliberately balances discussion, debate, and execution, moving far beyond simply telling people what to do. Scott argues emphatically that skipping steps here invariably leads to wasted time, frustration, and ultimately poor results.
Scott shares another painful but incredibly instructive lesson from her early days as a new manager at Google, right? About this very thing.
Yes, the AdSense team story.
She took over an AdSense team that was, in her words, a mess. In her adult supervision role, she confidently told them what to do. She reorganized them into 5 smaller, specialized teams with clear accountability, convinced this was the obvious solution.
Sounds logical on paper.
But because she completely failed to involve them in the decision-making process or even explain her rationale thoroughly, the team ultimately dissolved and results actually got worse. She learned the hard way that simply telling people what to do simply doesn't work, especially at a company like Google where decisions weren't made by authority alone, but by consensus and shared understanding.
That's a tough lesson. It's why Steve Jobs famously always got it right. Not because he was always right himself.
Right, that's the key.
But because he insisted, and not gently either, that people tell him when he's wrong. He specifically hired people who weren't afraid to argue with him, like Tim Cook and Joni Ive. His focus and the culture he cultivated was relentlessly on getting to the right answer over being right himself. That's a profound distinction that fuels the GSD wheel.
And this collaborative process is truly embodied in the GSD wheel, which has 7 crucial steps that you must cycle through quickly and continuously without skipping or getting stuck. The first step is listen.
Seems obvious, but often missed.
It means actively seeking ideas, especially from those closest to the problem. Tim Cook was a master of this quiet listening. He'd sometimes spend 10 minutes silently listening in one-on-ones, allowing people the space to share things they wouldn't otherwise reveal.
The power of silence.
Google also had an ideas team that used a wiki for submissions, and Sarah Teng's seemingly small idea for programmable keyboards led to a staggering 133% efficiency gain for her team. Shows the immense power of truly listening to even seemingly minor ideas. Astrid Tumenez, in her work Adapting to Filipino Culture, showed how offering food and loose appointments led to profound listening and built deep trust in a new cultural context. Listening takes many forms.
Second is clarify. What does that involve?
This means nurturing fragile, barely formed thoughts, as Joni Ives said of Steve Jobs' early ideas. Help people define problems and ideas clearly before they're debated or dismissed.
So don't shoot down ideas too early.
Exactly. Russ Laraway, another influential leader, challenged Kim's earlier bring me solutions approach, advocating instead for creating safe spaces for brainstorming, like Apple's Blue Sky sessions or Twitter's Hack Weeks, where people can develop new ideas without immediate pressure or judgment.
Give ideas room to breathe.
The historical example of Keynes versus FDR emphasizes the explainer's responsibility to be clear, tailoring communication to the audience, applying Georgia O'Keeffe's concept of selection, elimination, and emphasis to ensure your message is truly understood.
Third is debate. This sounds like where the friction happens.
It can be. This is where you polish ideas like ordinary rocks in a rock tumbler, as Steve Jobs described it, through vigorous, respectful discussion. The focus must be relentlessly on ideas, not on egos.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Scott suggests concepts like an ego coat check for meetings where strong personalities clash. It's crucial to call timeouts for emotion or exhaustion if a debate gets too heated, and to set clear decide-by dates to prevent endless arguments.
Keep it focused and time-bound.
Scott recounts her own painful mistake of prematurely deciding a seating chart because the debate among her team was so painful, leading to near mutiny later because they felt unheard. The example of Mark's OKR's meeting, where he skipped the listen, clarify, and debate phases, illustrates the danger of impractical plans and profound team disengagement because people weren't involved in the formation of goals.
Fourth is decide. The moment of truth.
Make decisions quickly, but not too quickly that you bypass the necessary listening, clarifying, and debating. Empower those closest to the facts and the customer to make decisions. Larry Page, for instance, famously decided to launch iTunes for Windows.
Oh yeah, that was controversial.
Despite significant internal resistance from Apple loyalists who felt it betrayed the Mac faithful. His decision was grounded in the market reality that most people used Windows, and he understood that the goal was to get iTunes into the most hands possible, not just Apple's.
Fifth is persuade. So the decision is made, now what?
Once decisions are made, especially if not everyone was involved in every step, you need to get the broader team, and sometimes even the wider organization, on board. Scott recommends using Aristotle's timeless framework for persuasion.
Aristotle.
Pathos. Appeal to the listener's emotions and feelings rather than just your own. Steve Jobs did this masterfully when launching iTunes for Windows, directly addressing the Mac faithful's sense of betrayal by humorously admitting hell froze over.
Acknowledging the feeling.
Ethos. Build your credibility through expertise, humility, and a track record of good judgment. Use we and our, rather than I and my, to convey shared ownership.
Builds trust.
And logos. Provide clear, compelling, logical reasoning and data for the decision. Show the rationale, the pros and cons considered, and why this path was chosen.
Logic, emotion, credibility. Got it. Sixth is execute.
This is where the rubber meets the road. Minimize what Scott calls collaboration tax, all the excessive meetings, bureaucratic overhead, and endless discussion so the team actually has time for actual work. Block out dedicated time for independent execution. Scott notes this is often a solitary task, and managers should fiercely protect that deep work time for their team and for themselves.
Protect the focus time.
And finally, seventh and vitally important is learn.
The feedback loop.
This is the crucial step of acknowledging when things go wrong, when a decision was incorrect, and then adapting quickly. Scott calls it the ugly baby syndrome, the natural human tendency to deny or sugarcoat failure because you birthed the idea.
We all love our own ideas.
Dick Costello's remarkable mental toughness at Twitter is a great example of this. He didn't deny bad press or internal struggles, but stayed centered, acknowledged reality, and focused relentlessly on solutions and moving forward. Even learning from an unintended consequence like the infamous Team Cozy Sex incident at Google.
Wait, what?
Yeah, apparently a result of a playful, informal team-building exercise that went too far. Shows the importance of acknowledging mistakes, adapting, and refining culture, rather than ignoring or covering up. You learn from everything.
Okay, beyond the GSD wheel, Scott also offers guidance on more formal processes that are inherent to management, starting with perhaps the hardest one. Poor performance and negative growth trajectories, which means firing people.
Ugh, nobody likes this part.
No. The core difficult truth here is that parting ways, though incredibly painful and difficult for everyone involved, is absolutely essential for both the individual, to find the better fit where they can excel and be happy, and the rest of the team. to prevent overburdening, resentment, and a drain on morale.
It sounds harsh, but sometimes it's necessary.
Managers often wait far too long, agonizing over the decision. And in doing so, they cause far more misery than necessary for the individual, the team, and themselves. Scott shares her own story as a bank teller, where her boss's reluctance to fire her for her severe mathematical deficiencies led to her being utterly miserable and incompetent in that role for far too long.
So the delay hurt her.
Exactly. Firing, she explains, isn't about the person sucking or being a bad human, but about the job sucking for that person, because it's not the right fit for their talents and aspirations. It creates the painful but necessary possibility for the person to excel and find happiness performing meaningful work elsewhere.
A different perspective.
Russ Laroe's positive experience years later with someone he had to fire who thanked him for pushing them into a better-fitting career powerfully shows the long-term positive outcomes possible when handled with humility and genuine care.
Conversely, what if a high-potential person is showing low performance but clearly has a steep growth trajectory? The superstar who's struggling.
Right. Scott offers a blunt but crucial directive. Manager, look in the mirror.
Ouch. Take responsibility.
The core idea here is that if someone with clear potential is underperforming, it's often, if not usually, the manager's fault. This could be for putting them in the wrong role, setting unreasonable or unclear expectations, failing to provide adequate support or resources, or perhaps not addressing personal problems or cultural fit issues that are hindering their performance.
So investigate before blaming.
Absolutely. The responsibility lies with the manager to diagnose and fix the situation, not simply blame the individual.
Okay, let's talk performance reviews, those dreaded annual things.
If your company uses formal annual or semi-annual reviews, the core idea is to make them genuinely effective by ensuring there are absolutely no surprises.
No surprises. That's the dream.
Right. It means consistent, daily, impromptu guidance so that the formal review simply codifies what has already been discussed and addressed rather than dropping a bombshell.
Makes sense. What else?
And you must not rely on unilateral judgment. Use peer checks, gather 360-degree feedback, and critically, solicit feedback on yourself first before you deliver a review to your team.
Practice what you preach.
Write them down for clarity and nuance, but also make a conscious decision about when and how to deliver the written review. Some people prefer to prepare by reading it first. Others need oral clarification and discussion. And if ratings are tied to compensation, it can be incredibly helpful to separate the rating compensation news from the development conversation itself.
Keep the money talk separate from the growth talk.
So the focus remains squarely on growth and improvement, not just the money.
How do you prevent backstabbing and political infighting within your team?
The core idea is simple, but requires discipline. Never, ever let team members talk about each other behind their backs. Insist on direct communication between the parties involved, or if necessary, facilitate a three-way conversation yourself.
No triangulation.
Exactly. This actively prevents political maneuvering, back-channeling, and builds a truly transparent, high-trust culture. Scott warns against bosses trying to mediate conflicts by creating worst possible solutions that satisfy no one. Instead, empower direct resolution.
And on promotions, how do you keep that fair?
The core idea is to ensure absolute fairness and objectivity in the process, actively avoiding favoritism or internal politics. Unhealthy competition for status can arise quickly if promotions are handled poorly or perceived as unfair.
How does Google handle it?
Google's engineering promotion committees, for instance, are a model for this. They debate the promotions of other people's direct reports based on objective accomplishments and impact, preventing manager favoritism. Scott also stresses that not all rewards should be tied to promotions, recognizing gurus who are rock stars or providing public presentation opportunities can celebrate individuals and make them feel seen without forcing them into unwanted management roles.
Good point. Finally, avoiding the twin pitfalls of absentee management and micromanagement. How do you strike that balance?
The core idea is to be an active, engaged partner with your team, not a hands-off, disengaged manager, nor a control freak who dictates every detail. Effective management requires consistent presence and thoughtful engagement, fostering a profound sense of shared responsibility and collaboration.
Not just hiring good people and leaving them alone.
Definitely not. Dick Costolo, the former Twitter CEO, aptly explained why hire the right people and leave them alone is a ridiculous fallacy, comparing it to saying, to have a good marriage, marry the right person and avoid spending any time with them. It just doesn't make sense.
Good analogy.
He also mentions Stephen Koslin's concept of mental prostheses, where team members truly complement each other's strengths and weaknesses, making the team stronger than the sum of its individual parts. Kanban boards, a visual system for tracking workflow, with columns like to do, in progress, and done, can be incredibly helpful for identifying bottlenecks, promoting accountability, and fostering mutual support and visibility across the team. It helps visualize activity, not just results.
And Scott highlights the power of management by walking around. Is that still relevant?
Absolutely. Dick Costello's simple practice of informal chats and genuinely noticing small things like cleaning dirty dishes in the micro kitchen allowed him to uncover small problems that often signaled much bigger systemic issues.
The little things matter.
They do. This reminds us that managers are always under the microscope, and their seemingly small actions or even offhand comments or clothing preferences can have a magnified impact on team morale and culture. Bob Rubin's famous "I like gold" comment leading to market shifts, or Kim's preference for white Oxford shirts inadvertently making others feel their attire was inappropriate,
Wow.
truly highlight the need for constant vigilance and absolute clarity in all communications, both verbal and nonverbal.
Okay, so after this comprehensive tour of Radical Candor, understanding its core principles, the pitfalls to avoid, and the detailed strategies for individual and team management, you're probably asking, okay, this sounds amazing, but where do I actually start? What's my order of operations?
Yeah, the how-to roadmap. Scott provides a clear, actionable one.
What's step one?
First, and fundamentally, share your stories. Don't just tell your team about radical candor as a concept. Explain it in your own words and, crucially, share your personal anecdotes. Tell your version of the story or the Bob story or another personal failure or success where candor was key.
Show vulnerability.
Exactly. Your personal experiences will resonate far more deeply than any abstract management theory, making the concept relatable and real.
Second,
solicit guidance daily. This isn't a 1DM thing you check off a list. Make it a consistent, quick 1 to 2 minutes practice to ask for feedback, especially criticism, from your team. Embrace the initial discomfort because it won't happen overnight. It should become as natural a habit as brushing your teeth, consistent small actions that prevent bigger problems.
Third, and this runs in parallel, perfect your 1.1 conversations.
Also,
ensure you're having meaningful, regular 1.1s where your direct reports set the agenda, focusing on their needs and priorities. Use this time, beyond just immediate tasks, for deeper career conversations, exploring their life story, their wildest dreams, and their practical 18-month growth plans. These profound conversations are the bedrock of the Care Personally axis.
okay. Fourth,
once you've built that initial trust by being open to feedback, improve giving impromptu guidance. Practice the situation behavior impact, SBI, model diligently for both praise and criticism. Actively gauge your guidance to ensure it's landing as intended, that it's truly radically candid and not perceived as ruinous empathy or obnoxious aggression.
and adjust as needed.
Exactly. Be prepared to adjust your approach for each individual as everyone receives feedback differently.
Fifth, perfect your staff meetings. Make them better.
Optimize them, not just for updates, but for learning, reviewing key metrics and insights, for listening, using shared documents for updates, perhaps study hall snippets to avoid endless verbal reports, and for clarifying, identifying key decisions and debates for the team, ensuring everyone is on the same page about what needs to be discussed and decided.
Make them productive, not just a status report.
Sixth, drive results collaboratively by consciously implementing the GSD wheel across your team's processes. Consistently cycle through, listen, clarify, debate, decide, persuade, execute, and learn. This systematic approach ensures collective achievement, shared understanding, and continuous improvement, replacing ad hoc, inefficient processes.
Seventh, calibrate growth management plans annually.
The rock star, superstar thing.
Right. Take the time to assess each team member's growth trajectory, whether they're a rock star needing stability and recognition or a superstar craving steep growth, and align it with team needs. Ensure fair ratings, equitable compensation, and recognition that truly motivates each individual according to their unique aspirations.
Eighth, return to guidance by actively encouraging your team to gauge each other's guidance.
Scale it out.
This is where radical candor truly becomes pervasive within your team, multiplying your impact. This creates a culture where everyone is empowered to give and receive helpful feedback from their peers. If needed, consider rolling out manager fix-it weeks to address systemic issues that emerge from this broader feedback.
Ninth, walk around. That management by walking around principle.
Dedicate structured time each week for informal chats, for simply being present in the team's working environment, to pick up on subtle cues and address small issues before they become big, festering problems. This is about staying connected to the genuine pulse and well-being of your team beyond formal meetings.
And finally, 10th.
Hence, apply radical candor to your formal processes. Infuse these core principles of caring personally and challenging directly into your hiring practices, into the difficult but necessary process of firing, into promotions, and into formal performance reviews to ensure fairness, transparency, and effectiveness across all aspects of talent management.
As Kim Scott consistently emphasizes, implementing radical candor isn't about rigid adherence to steps, is it? It's more about
No, not at all.
consistently returning to two foundational questions, two guiding lights. Am I showing my team that I genuinely care personally? And am I challenging each person directly enough to help them grow and excel?
That's the core test.
If the answer to both is a consistent yes, you're probably doing okay. It's an iterative process, a daily practice, not a destination you just arrive at.
And there you have it. We've journeyed through the powerful, often counterintuitive framework of radical candor. We've understood that being a truly kick-ass boss isn't about being nice or being mean, but about consistently demonstrating those two core principles. Genuinely caring personally and challenging directly. These principles, when consistently and courageously applied, unlock a virtuous cycle of trust, profound individual growth, and outstanding collective achievement. It requires consciousness, courage, and a willingness to learn daily, to be vulnerable, and to embrace discomfort. But the rewards, meaningful relationships, and truly outstanding results are immense.
So as you reflect on this deep dive and consider how you might apply these insights, maybe consider this. If radical candor is truly about understanding and embracing the nuances of human dynamics at work, how might adopting these very practices not only transform your professional life, how you lead, how you collaborate, how you contribute, but also ripple out?
Ripple out how?
Ripple out to enrich your personal relationships and interactions beyond the office, creating a more honest, more productive, and ultimately more fulfilling world for everyone around you. What's one small thing you can do differently today, maybe even right after listening, to just say it with care?